Good morning and welcome to Planet in the Word. This is week 7. And this week you're going to be reading the end of Exodus and I believe the beginning of Leviticus. But what we're going to talk about today is specifically week 39. Now, week 39 is all about the priestly garments. And God spells out very clearly exactly how he wants the intermediaries between himself and the Israelites dressed. He's very specific. He wants them to make sure that they understand the weight of their position as they function as a go-between between God and himself. And in fact, when he starts going through the priestly garments, one of the things that he does is he talks about he wants them to represent Israel, but he also wants part of their garments and clothing to be an example of righteousness, which would be the white linen, and purity, which would be the gold. So he's very specific about how he lays out these intermediaries, how he wants them to dress and how he wants to be worshiped. But the one thing that is never addressed in all of chapter 39 is footwear. And in fact, it isn't even mentioned as part of their garb. So the question really becomes, why not? Well, in order to answer that question, we really have to go back and understand an ancient Eastern culture to really grasp what's going on here. So in ancient Eastern culture, footwear, and especially shod footwear, was a representation of authority and position. What do I mean by that? Well, if you look even to the ancient Eastern culture of Egypt, and you understand that they had a phrase that was to be under someone's sandal. To be under someone's sandal meant that you were under their authority. You were subjected to them. That shod foot gave them a political or even a social position above you. In fact, in Tutankhamun's tomb, among his grave goods, there were included some ceremonial sandals that were engraved with his enemy's likeness so that he could literally walk on his enemies. In addition to the sandals, he had a footstool. Now, this footstool had a very similar motif, but the footstool was engraved with the 9 traditional enemies of Egypt, and they were bound. And they were literally under the feet of Tutankhamun. Inanna, the Sumerian goddess, in her hymn states, "He has given me dominion. He has placed the earth like a sandal under my foot." A relic from Iran shows the Agadi climbing a mountain of his enemies with his shod feet on his enemy's back. And even the Nineveh reliefs from the British Museum show the Judean captives as they're bowed down paying homage or tribute to Sennacherib. In fact, in Akkadian, the word for foot is exactly the same as the word for possession or to be in authority over someone. So you understand, across ancient history, feet and shod feet gave authority and position over someone, which helps us to understand why we have that concept when God says to Abraham in Genesis 13:17, "Arise, walk about the land through its length and breadth, for I will give it to you." Why? Because to have someone under your foot meant position of authority and power. So now let's talk about, likewise, the removing of your foot. They have found in some ancient documentation meant to relinquish your authority over something. If you removed your foot from your property, what you were doing is you were, in essence, that's the literal translation of the word, sort of to sell or transfer ownership. You would actually remove your foot from the property. We can see this in the example of Ruth when Boaz is redeeming Ruth and there is a sandal exchanged. He is giving up his right. He's removing his foot from the place that Ruth could have in his life. So now let's examine carefully how this could apply to other biblical instances. For example, when Moses stands on the land where the burning bush is, and God says, remove your shoes, you're standing on holy ground. Or what about when the leader of the armies of the Lord meets Joshua getting ready to enter the promised land, and he says, take off your shoes, you are standing on holy ground. What was he saying to him? He was saying, you don't own this land. This dirt belongs to God. In both instances, it is that ancient concept of you don't own this territory. This belongs to someone above you in station. So, why don't the priests wear shoes? I suspect it's the same thing. When the priests served in the temple of the Lord, they were literally standing on the territory that belonged to their God. So they removed their shoes. They did not have authority on this piece of dirt, this piece of land. This area belonged to Yahweh. And in serving him, they needed to acknowledge this was not their ground. It belonged to the Lord. I hope you find that interesting. I hope as you read, you catch glimpses of this in your Bible. Thanks for stopping by. Have a good week. Bye-bye.